One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. Our guest today is Kenneth Miles. Kenneth is the Assistant Vice Chancellor, and he's the Executive Director of the Cox Communications Center for Student Athletes at LSU. Greetings, Kenneth. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, and thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Now, Kenneth, you've been at LSU since 2008, and when they initially brought you in, they brought you in as the Executive Director of the Cox Communications Academic Center for Student Athletes. Over time, you were given the title of Assistant Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs. Can you give us some insight on your responsibilities in the role that you currently hold there at LSU?
I want to say within the first, 3 or 4 years, the title of Assistant Vice Chancellor came about. I think one of the things within this position is that there's a strong focus on retention and graduation, recognizing the strategies that we put in place to be able to retain our student athletes and graduate them, and an upward trend, I think, made others realize perhaps there's some things that we can incorporate across campus. The title itself, I think, shows how one would have the ability to navigate through the academic affairs terrain. I think it also shows, too, that there might be a particular knowledge that's actually required and needed within our respective area as we focus on this retention and graduation piece. We recognize that recruitment and retention go hand in hand, and why not learn from student athlete support centers, overall, of how we can perhaps implement some of these things for our non-student athlete population. I think you can look at it and note no 2 days the same. Essentially, there are many hats that are worn. Within a given day, there could be conversations with the president, the executive vice provost, deans of the colleges, associate deans within the colleges, vice president of student life, dean of students, parents, prospective student athletes, coaches, athletic administration. So there are many hats that are worn throughout the day, which means that I would assume many roles throughout the day. And I haven't even spoken about our own student athletes and internal staff at that point.
It sounds to me like on the part about the campus, it's a two-way street. They lean on you for some of the things you do with student athletes, and I assume you lean on them for some of the things they do with non-student athletes for the overall purpose of retention and graduation of students, period.
Yeah, I can give you a good example. We had a policy here, for example, that wasn't very student-centric, and I think it was just something that kind of permeated over time. But in looking at when students were enrolled in the winter session, academic decisions were being made about students from the fall right in the middle of that time. And so what we recognize is that perhaps that might not necessarily be the best time to evaluate and make a decision regarding a student. You either make the decision prior to the winter session beginning, or you wait till after the fact. And again, that has nothing to do with just being a student athlete. It has everything with simply being a student and understanding what's going to be a little bit more student-centered and a little more student-friendly. That was actually reviewed and acknowledged that it wasn't very student-centric, and a change was incorporated.
In terms of the role you play, I guess you were a big part of that discussion.
Yeah, I had simply brought it to the right people's attention and say, hey, we need to take a look at this and recognize that if we're moving towards an institution who's going to have a strong focus on the retention and graduation of our students, this might be one of the things we might review. And it was very simple, acknowledging that perhaps during the time when one might be enrolled in the winter session, it may put them in a better position than what they were from the fall. Be a little premature to have someone being dismissed or having to sit out for a semester without actually seeing how they may actually do within that session.
It seems like the role and the position that you're in would be beneficial to many campuses. What exactly is the reporting structure, and how is the position evaluated? Obviously you work with student athletes, but you also work on campus and to the benefit of students as a whole?
Well, in the reporting structure, there's a direct reporting line to the Vice Provost of Academic Support and Review, Dr. Matt Lee. He actually does my evaluations, and we also go through our planning sessions together. There's a dotted line to the athletic director, and part of that is to make sure that the communication across both planes is there. So I would sit in on the senior staff meetings there, as well as sitting in on any academic meetings that Dr. Lee would ask me to sit upon.
Right. You've been on a few different campuses throughout your career. Is this a position, or even just the reporting structure or some form of this role, do you think would be beneficial across college campuses?
Yeah, many colleges have moved towards this type of model. I think, one, the notion was to be able to promote and preserve the integrity of the process. I think there was perceptions or some thoughts when the reporting structure was under athletics that the only thing that really mattered was the eligibility of student athletes.
Right.
And I think in recognizing that you have a integrated campus, why not make certain that the academic support programs are integrated within the academic arena? So, as you start to look at the overall enterprise, it's important to be able to have that and allow folks to be able to navigate within that. So, yes, I would recommend that. If you don't, I think it's worth it to take a look. At a minimum, get an understanding of the landscape of the institution and making sure that you have a person that's in a position where they could actually have some influence.
Now, of course, the discussions and communications in terms of campus and student retention and graduation ties to your assistant vice chancellor position. Can you give us a little insight on what you do specifically at the Cox Communications Center for student athletes and how that's a benefit to those who participate in athletics at LSU?
We end up working with them from the recruiting process to the retention, to the graduation, to life after. So essentially, I oversee the academic operations for our student athletes. What that would entail is academic advising support, which we work in conjunction with the schools and colleges, recognizing that schools and colleges certify degrees. That would also be meeting with prospective students and their parents, talking about the things that we do, and recognizing how we have 4 goals within our academic center that we essentially live by daily and remind us of our duties and responsibilities. The first is to graduate our students. The second is to prepare them for life after college. The third is to lead by example and promote the integrity, academic integrity. And the fourth would be providing professional development support for our team, which is our staff here, and providing them with the necessary competencies to be able to work with our students, based on the premise of the warning you would receive on an airplane. In case the plane drops atmospheric pressure, oxygen mask will drop. Noted that you need to put it on yourself first before you can help anyone else. And so we remind people of what our goals are, and more importantly, we tell them where we're going. And we try to be that premier provider of transformative student-athlete support services, recognizing that there's a transformation that happens once they enter here. So whether it be academically, going from freshman, sophomore, junior to senior, going from impulsive thinking to much more critical thinking, from a professional career development standpoint, of going through resume writing, mock interviews, so you name it, be able to prepare them professionally. So, all of those things kind of tie into the recruitment and retention strategy.
Okay, and specifically with the things you mentioned, that dotted line to the athletics director, that communication, this is how you put a report on his desk or when you're communicating to him about, hey, this is what we've accomplished, and this is the benefit to our student athletes that we've provided. I guess this academic year, this semester, over the last few weeks, here are some things that have been accomplished and how we can celebrate what we're doing with our student athletes.
Absolutely. And I think the other part, too, I would be remiss not to recognize the support that I receive, whether it is financially through the Tiger Athletic Foundation or from athletics, and providing some of these support programs for our student athletes as well. And so I recognize the collective efforts of all within this process. I think the great thing is that everybody has some sort of trust and there's buy-in to what we're saying that's critical and important for our students. I think one other metric to note how it all comes out, because there's always quantitative metrics that people like to look at, graduation success rates at that point. And so from 2008, which was when our Director of Athletics came aboard, Joe Oliva, and myself actually, we have risen from 69% to 90%.
Well, Kenneth, this has been an excellent conversation. It sounds like what you do there, you yourself, the role you play is a great fusion and represent a great benefit to campus, to athletics, student athletes, and students alike there at LSU. Thank you very much for joining us here on One Question.
Thank you very much. And anything else, feel free to reach out to me.
That was Kenneth Miles. He's the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Executive Director for the Cox Communications Center for Student Athletes at LSU. And this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.